everybody, welcome back. Thanks for joining for perforated pin art. Just in case you aren't sure exactly what perforated pin art is, here's a little example and some information for you. Let's begin with our included materials and supplies. Okay, you have, for now, I'm going to set aside the glue and the dowels, and let's look at our paper and the pins. You have 2 pieces of paper. These are your paper canvases, one to practice on and one for your masterpiece, or you can have 2 masterpieces. I gave you 230 GSM watercolor paper. This is my favorite paper for perforated art. Now, GSM means grams per square meter, and it refers to the weight of the paper. For reference, a 20-pound bond standard copy paper is 75 GSM. This lightweight construction paper, this is 110 GSM. And I'm just going to show you with this pen how they work just as well as this heavy paper that I've given you, but this one looks better and you'll see why shortly. So these actually work. There's also cardstock. This lightweight general cardstock is 190 GSM, and then there's also acrylic paint paper, and that's 300 GSM. And this is great for pin art, but it's more difficult to poke your pins through, and that's why I prefer the watercolor paper at 230 GSM. So the GSM 230 paper, I'm going to just go ahead and do an example here. When you poke through it, it's a little more solid, takes a little more pressure to poke through, and you can see it has very clean and clear holes. And on the flip side, there's a texture that you can feel. Also, while we're at it, note that this paper has one side that is very smooth and one side that is lightly textured, and you can pick whichever side you choose to use. So next in our kit we have 2 sheets of vellum paper. Now the vellum paper is used to help put our image on our canvas paper and keep it lined up, and this is why. So if I'm going to use this butterfly image, and when I put it on this paper and start poking holes, if I accidentally move that, then getting it lined back up with the holes is difficult. So what I do is I line up the vellum paper with the top edge and the left edge of the canvas. The vellum paper is slightly smaller, although they say they're the same size. Then I decide where I want my image that I'm going to poke, and then I use my straight pin. We'll talk about the pins in a second, but I use the pin, one of the pins that comes in the kit, and I pin it to the vellum. That way, my image is on the vellum, and then while I'm poking, if it moves, I can always just realign the top edge and the left edge, and I should be right back where I started. So that's the purpose of the vellum. And the vellum paper is just plain old vellum paper. You could use parchment paper, you can use tracing paper, just whatever you need to use to get that image to stay on there. If you want to clip your image, I know you could very well put your paper on there and then use a paper clip. You use a paper clip and then you accidentally press on it too hard, then it will end up crinkling or folding or bending your canvas paper. So another option would be to use painter's tape. So we could put our image on the paper and then use painter's tape. And that's a very valid, good way to do it. You just want to make sure that you are using painter's tape so that it will come up off the paper without tearing it or taking levels of it with the tape when you take it off. Not included in your kit is going to be a washcloth or a hand towel or something that's a little bit soft that you can put your image on, and while you're doing your pin poking, it's not going to either dull the pin by consistently hitting a hard surface, and it's also not going to make you have to hold that paper and chance that it's going to bend or crinkle on you. So it's a good idea to have something like this to on top of your work surface. The next thing that you might want that is not included are some colored pens or pencils. And I'll tell you, this is why. We talked a little bit about the shading. And so when we're planning on doing an image that has a lot of shading or intricate detail, we can plan ahead for our different pin sizes. Now I'm using 3 different pin sizes, so I have 3 colors. And what I might do is start by everywhere I'm going to use the largest diameter pin, I'm going to choose a color. So if I'm going to do green, I'm going to do large pin is green, just so I'll remember. And then I'm going to outline in green everywhere that I'm going to use that large pin. And I would probably go ahead and outline almost this entire penguin. However, these feet are very, very intricate, so I think I may do the feet in a smaller diameter pin, and we also don't have to be perfect on this because we're going to use a little bit of our own flair when we're poking our holes. Now I'm also going to skip this what are these, wings flippers? I'm going to skip that one for this reason. A large diameter pin, if I do here and then also here, when I get to this point, there's a very large chance that the pokes are going to run together and create a tear. I can show you an example of that. So here's an example of where this penguin was outlined with a large pin, and when we got to this section, it has actually torn the little beak of this poor penguin. And so we want to make sure that we have space between our pokes, and also that we're not using too large of a pin in an intricate place. So I would continue to plan out where I'm going to make my pins, and I'm going to give you a little more information here. Let's say that our medium is going to be purple. I would then go in my less darker lines and use my medium, and again, these little toes in between, I'm going to do an outline with a medium pin, and then I'm going to do my fine in red, and I'll finish off those little lines, making sure that I don't go all the way in. Okay, the fine pin also is good for shading, and you might see that this penguin has some darker shading areas and some finer areas. And so I would use my medium to maybe just do some single lines wherever the shading is dark. Nothing too close together. Don't try to make it look like the sketch, because we can't have our pins that close together. And then use our fine pin for detail and some smaller, finer shading. Like that. Let's talk about the pins that come in your kit. So the pins, if I can get this little bag to open. They come inserted into a piece of wax paper or parchment paper, as you can see here. This is just a safer way for these to travel. And let's talk about the different pins. So pins come in different sizes, and they also come in different widths. So the diameter of the pin is measured in millimeters. I gave you a T pin, which has a larger diameter. I can't off the top of my head remember the diameters of all these pins, but it is in your instruction book what those diameters are. So that would be a larger diameter, and then a medium diameter, the two straight pins, and then you have this glass ball pin, which may be blue, maybe yellow, maybe green, maybe some other color. They come in assorted colors, but that's a very fine small diameter pin. So if you look at an image such as, let's look at this image as compared to this image, and then I think included in your kit is this image. You can see that some images are super simple. For a simple image like that, I would use my large diameter pin and just space my pokes around that image. For this image, I may decide to use a combination of pins or go strictly with the medium size pin all the way around, because it's somewhat delicate but not super fine detail. An image such as this, however, I would want to use several different pins. You can see it has some shading and some very small detailed lines. So for this one, I might use the larger pin for the outlines and the darkness, and then the medium pin, and so on and so forth. Let's talk some more about these pins. As you can see, they can be somewhat difficult to manage. And so let's talk about ways that we can manage. Obviously, the way they were packaged, you can put them on a piece of paper, a piece of fabric, or anything, and just weave them, poke in, come back out, and that'll hold your pin, keep it in place. You can store it that way. There are also other alternatives. This one is a little case that has a magnetic bottom. Magnets hold the pins very well. That was a bad example, but magnets are a good way to keep your pins in place. And then there's also pin cushions, come in all kinds of different sizes and shapes. And this is one I choose. It has a strap so that you could keep your pins handy. I don't ever use that, but you could. I also like this one because it has these sections, and I use the sections to keep my different sizes of pins together. Now, if you've ever had a problem with holding a pin or pulling a pin out of something difficult, so if I stick this pin in, this happens to be a very hard surface, and then I have a hard time pulling it out, either because my hands are sweaty or because I've just put lotion on my hands or something. There's these little rubber grabbers. You find these in any sewing area, and they allow you to grip the pin a little bit easier. Also, if you have a difficult time holding a pin, if your joints get stiff, or you have very large hands and you have a hard time grasping the pin, you can push a pin through a pencil eraser, and that just gives you more leverage. You're not squeezing that tiny little pin so much. You can use other erasers as well. So I've got these tiny little erasers that I stick pins through. Now, one thing with those is sometimes it's difficult to get the pin into, depending on how dense the rubber is. And so I just get it started, and then I flip it over and push it on the table until the pin comes through. And this, again, gives me a little more leverage. All the way up to the giant erasers. That really is helpful for little hands. And then if you want another side project, you could get some air dry clay and form fit your hand with a pin inside. This one, as you can see by my little fingernail imprint, is form fitted so that I can hold it in my hand and it fits perfectly. And I've got my pin in there so I can just make my pokes, and I don't have to squeeze so tight, and I don't have any problems with that. The only thing about that is you want to absolutely make sure that you are letting it cure completely before you try to use it, or it will just break apart and crumble into your hands. Beginning with your towel or your washcloth, you can tell this is my craft cloth because it's got dried glue and all kinds of things on there. Okay, so our paper needs to be, I'm sorry, we're going to do our top and left edge alignment and then decide where our image is going to go. I am not super fond of centering, and so I'm going to turn mine this way a little bit and down lower to the bottom, and then pin it to my Velcro, or I'm sorry, to my vellum. There we go. And then I'm going to make my plan. I should have done that before I pinned it, but I'll do that real quick. Let's see. I'm going to leave the brown as my basic outline. This is the image that you probably received in your kit, but you can use any image from a coloring book, something you've drawn. So I've got my design pinned to my vellum. I'm going to line up my vellum with my top edge and the left edge of my canvas, and this is where we will begin. One of the most important parts is I always start with the larger pin, but you can start inside, work your way out. You can do it in any way that you want to. But I wanted to point out to you that one thing that you want to be sure of is that you're, again, not putting your pin pokes too close together. You can see the size of the pinhole from the first poke, and you want to make a very good distance between those pin pokes. And I'm going to show you what that looks like up close and on the back. So you can see that it's a line, even though they're distanced a pretty good distance apart. Now, remember I talked about the image shifting accidentally, and we want to line it back up. Top and left edge, line it back up, and here's a good way to test it. Well, there's two things here. With my medium-sized pin that you have two of, I'm going to just kind of poke through and make sure that I'm lined up, and I am. But here's another option. When we first start poking our holes, if you pretend that I hadn't started yet, I could just pick a spot and stick that pin in and let it go into my towel or my washcloth, and that kind of holds everything together. That's a better way to show it. So that's another option for you. Okay, so we're just going to continue poking Again, I always do the outline first and then move to the inner part, and I usually go all of my large pokes first and then my medium and then my fine from there. So at this point, I wanted to point something else out to you. Once you've poked quite a bit, it's really easy to line your image back up if it comes off, because you can feel, and sometimes if you don't have that vellum in there, the top paper will actually stick to the canvas paper because of all the pokes in it. So I'm going to move that pin and place it in a different location where I've already poked a hole. I can find a hole, there we go, just to help me hold it in place. Okay, now I'm going to move on to my medium-sized pin, and I'm actually going to use one of my little eraser tricks. Okay, my fingers are getting tired, so I am going to start using my eraser. And I think, yeah, that's where I left off. You may notice that I am making my fine point pokes much closer together than my larger or my medium point pokes, and you'll be able to see how that works. Also, if I lose my place in a line as I'm poking, I just kind of gently drag it along the line until I find the hole that I missed or that I did last, and I'll be able to feel where that poke is, and then I drag it along to see if that's the last one. That's how you can find your place again if you lose your place. Okay, let's check this out. Now, when we peel this away, the vellum away from our canvas paper, you want to do it kind of slowly because oftentimes it will stick in there. Here we go. And ta-da! Now, if you want to flip it over and see the back side, there's even more of a texture, and it almost makes the image, not almost, but it does make the image much easier to see. Okay, so next we are going to finish our piece off with our dowels. So we're going to want 2 dowels, and how this is going to work is we're going to affix these dowels to the top and bottom of the paper, and then use our twine. Come on. We use our twine to make a nice, beautiful hanging handle. Now, you may want to tie onto the handle first before you glue it on, or you may want to wait. If you wait, you'll have to, give it some time for the dowel to dry to the paper before you start messing with tying it on. Either way is okay. I always wait till later, so I'm going to go right on ahead in here. The first thing we want to do is just draw the teeniest, tiniest little bead of glue along the top. Okay. Luckily, this isn't the glue that you have because mine is jammed up. There we go. Okay. The teeniest, tiniest, very fine strip of glue there. Now this is going to dry clear, so it doesn't really matter if you get too far, but what we don't want is for it to be very thick, so you can almost not see it there. And while that gets a little tacky, I'm just going to kind of measure and do the same thing on one dowel. Very thin, fine. The reason for that is it actually makes it tackier if it's very thin, and give it a few seconds to start getting a little tacky before we stick it on there. I'm gonna turn where I put the glue and do glue to glue. Make sure it's centered on there, and then just hold it for probably about 15 seconds. Okay, it's stuck on there, but like I said earlier, we're going to want to let it sit for at least a good 15 minutes. I usually wait an hour or two before I start messing with it. So we're going to repeat that same thing along the bottom. Very thin, fine layer. And on the dowel. Who would have thought it would be stickier with less glue? Okay, glue to glue. And hold in place for a good 15 seconds or so. There we go. Okay, so I don't want you to have to wait for mine to dry. So I'm going to go ahead and show you with this practice piece I have here. We're going to take our twine. This is jute twine. And to make it simple, there's a couple of different ways we can do this, but I'm just going to almost finish a little knot, slip it over that edge, pull it tight. Same on the other side. Slip it over that edge and pull it tight. Isn't that pretty? Okay, there's a couple of things you can do at this point. This will eventually straighten out. If you wanted to, you can get it a little damp. And then, what do I do with my paper towel? And then you can use something to straighten it out a little bit and weight both pieces down, and that'll make it stay. Okay, another option is these ends can be untwisted and frayed for another pretty look. So there's 3 strands, untwist the 3 strands, and then you can untwist each individual strand, fray it out, and then same as with the top part, I can get that just a little bit wet. And structure it any way I want, and then let it dry. As it dries, it'll dry more in that shape or fringe look, however you want to say it. So there it is. Just imagine this hanger on this piece. And give you another look-see. So hanging, don't know if you can see this, but hanging with a light behind it, it's absolutely gorgeous. Hang it in your window. Okay, thanks for joining. Come again next time with another kit and we'll have some more fun.